On that note, U.S. President Joe Biden is confirmed to be absent from the 43rd ASEAN Summit and will be represented by Vice President Kamala Harris. His absence will likely have an influence on the deliberations of issues which are of interest to the United States, such as the South China Sea and the Myanmar crisis. And to know more about the impacts of Biden's absence in the summit, we are now joined by Suzie Sudarman, Chair of the Center for American Studies at the University of Indonesia.
Hello, good afternoon, Ibu Suzie. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening from the US.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to talk with us. We truly appreciate it. Ibu Suzie, if you don't mind, I would like to dive right into our first question. But before we talk in details about the impacts of the absence of President Joe Biden in ASEAN Summit, maybe we can first talk about the fundamentals. We would love to learn more, actually, first about US-ASEAN relationship, which seems to have like an on and off switch. Depends on the administration. Could you maybe elaborate on that? Is there a difference between how US sees ASEAN as a partner between Democratic administration and Republican administrations? Because that's how it seems, looking at how Donald Trump, for instance, rarely comes to ASEAN at all, and now Joe Biden seems to be making amends, but still with this really recent developments in his relation with ASEAN, we need to discuss that more. But Ibu Suzie, please tell us a little bit more about the general assessment of US-ASEAN relations.
Okay, I'm quoting from a book by Scott Marcial that discusses these things. And he said, the US really doesn't understand Southeast Asia. And it struggles to engage consistently and effectively. During 1990 to 1991, the US lost strategic prism, but the rise of China injected strategic elements in US Southeast Asia region. The rise of China created a tendency to view Southeast Asia through US-China relations. Then he said further that there are three paradigms that need to evolve. One needs a lot of attention to Southeast Asia. Number two, Southeast Asia needs more engagement. And in the US-China rivalry must not put Southeast Asia in between. So this is the consequences of not understanding Southeast Asia, and there should be a push more for understanding between the two countries, and it seems like it's faltering. And it has been apparent diplomatic downgrade, if I have to have an opinion on this.
Right. Ibu Suzie, it has been confirmed by the White House that Joe Biden is going to be represented by the Vice President Kamala Harris here in Jakarta for the ASEAN Summit. How do you think the absence of the very leaders of, the economic powerhouse, such as the United States, will influence the way we navigate discussions pertaining things that are truly crucial on the tables of ASEAN, South China Sea, and also the Myanmar crisis, which we believe something that USA really has a voice in?
Okay, as I said, it seems to me there's some degree of diplomatic downgrade. Washington's eyes sees ASEAN as increasingly seen as having unclear benefits. The US is very concerned over creating a new world order, and ASEAN doesn't seem to be supportive of the idea that the US have launched. If you remember, ASEAN itself has been tied to different forces in this world. In the geopolitical shift and the geoeconomic shift, we can see Myanmar with Russia, and Myanmar with China, Cambodia with China, Laos with China, and everybody seems to be doing their own thing. Like the Philippines, clearly trying to do what it seems to be important for its national security. And ASEAN is not doing much over what happens in South China Sea and Philippines' national interests. ASEAN is also not agile in resolving and managing various challenges due to increasingly strained relationship between the people and their leaders. Indonesia has shown proximity to BRICS, and BRICS is considered antithesis to various Western multilateral forums. And these things are important in terms of if Joe Biden perceives that we need to make a new world order based on American leadership, these kind of challenges seems to be not to be well accepted in terms of what the U.S. had in mind. And if you ask furthermore about the people in the National Security Council, like Jake Sullivan and all that, they are for liberal internationalism. And we are forcing our way into deliberately saying hilirisasi, or making sure that we're not exporting our critical minerals. And this has become a problem because IPEF itself wanted to add another element in IPEF, which is concerning critical minerals. And this is something that should be noted because Kamala Harris will go to Vietnam. Biden went to India and then probably to Vietnam in the future. And we seem to be left behind because we are seemingly friendly, but not to be in lockstep. First of all, we try to engage America in terms of Inflation Reduction Act by allowing Indonesia to export its cars with batteries made in factories in Sulawesi by China. And the U.S. is very strict over that, in saying that if the car has China-made batteries, it should not be exported to the U.S. So there seems to be a lot of things that have to be resolved because we are a signatory to IPEF, and IPEF is very strict over certain things like supply chain, corruption, anti-corruption, transparency, and then another element that would be added, which is critical minerals, which has become the discussion throughout the world, because what we are doing is actually impacting a lot of the economies of the alliance of the United States. I think it's very clear there's some kind of like downgrading. Apart from that, there's another wrinkles that suddenly appears in the JETP, Just Energy Transitional Partnership. It's not going very smoothly because according to Indonesian leaders, it says that the concessional law is concessional part of the money of $10 billion is not concessional. It's more into profit-oriented thing. And then some of the critical element is that they're not very happy about local content, because that creates problems in terms of the project of JETP, which is already faltering, and then may become a threshold to say it's very difficult to do business in Indonesia. So there are many things that are not incongruent with what the U.S. is trying to do, and therefore we feel the consequences of some of their decision into a slightly downgrading the relationship with Indonesia, because there have been and other things involved, which is the situation in Natuna with their intention of putting a spy plane there, and Indonesia said no, Poseidon. And then another thing is that Indonesia doesn't want to become part of the chip alliance. So we are not really doing a good job in terms of making sure that things are going okay with U.S.-Indonesia relations.
All right, Ibu Suzie, thank you so much for your fascinating insights on what factors could be causing the U.S. to be giving the cold shoulder to Indonesia and ASEAN. But I want to talk more about who will be representing USA at the ASEAN Summit, which is Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, as we know, with all due respect to VP Harris, of course, she's been somewhat quite lacking in experience when it comes to global diplomacy circuit. So even in internal politics in the US, he's been taking more of a behind-the-scene role. So how do you think she will perform at the ASEAN Summit, Bu Suzie, especially when you think about how she could represent US's best interests pertaining to the quote-unquote rivalry that is going on between US and China in the Indo-Pacific region?
Well, if you're speaking in diplomatic terms, you can downgrade the relations by putting a lower level officials that are not really in tune with foreign policy, for instance. That's just a way of saying, I really don't think ASEAN matters anymore to us. It's like, it is a great thing to have a vice president fitting in, but still, there's no congruence. I think we need to harmonize a little bit our relations with the alliance, because it can cause export problems for Indonesian goods. It can cause relationship hardship between us and major powers. And then we need to consider this, because we need to learn to compromise, not completely kowtowing, but a little bit more well-intentioned and giving some degree of goodwill, showing that we are good people and we are going to have a better relations with countries that are more powerful and could be a balancer in the South China Sea region. But that's not happening, and the U.S. can send some lower level officials. It's a choice. If you compare that with U.S.-India relations, Biden would come. Biden would come, and Biden would try to make sure that India comes as a good friend to America, and we seem to be going in different directions. First, you sign up IPEF, and then you stop exporting things, and then suddenly you want to be part of OECD. It's like from one thing into another thing, and everything doesn't seem to be in harmony. Because if you go with OECD, the requirement is much more harsh. Not even any Southeast Asia countries would sign on. And then the IPEF that requires anti-corruption practices, transparency, or the EU's problem with deforestation is not being addressed. So I think to be in good relations with powerful countries, you need to readjust. You need to make sure that things that make sense should be met. Otherwise, we'll have problems. And then we are buffer zone, like Ukraine. It is very dangerous. I hope my government would understand this, because it seems like different sorts of foreign policy happening all at once. You have OECD, you have IPEF, you have BRICS, you have problems with exports. I don't know where we're going. Honestly, it's not understandable for me. I can't put things together that sort of like make sense, because as we are having problems with places that we export our stuff, people will lose jobs. Like Nike, for instance. Nike cannot export to Europe. Why don't you listen over deforestation? I'm not doing deforestation, but rich people are doing deforestation, right? I don't know anything about nickel, but rich people are doing something on nickel. But we get the brunt of it because the economy will slow down without harmonizing with what makes sense. I think making sense is important, and creating goodwill with other countries smoothes out our exports. And we need that to create jobs.
One final question to you.
That's my view.
Right. Thank you, Professor. Just one final question to you. The past couple of years, as U.S. has been quite progressive, or rather aggressive, with its U.S. Indo-Pacific strategies, and also here in ASEAN we have ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific, and that's where we see the two things intertwine. And another progress that we take note from yesterday here in Jakarta was the signing that the member states agreed on kickstarting the negotiations on the DEFA, the Digital Economy Framework Agreement, Professor, meaning that we are making strides towards de-dollarization and using less dollars, finding common currency within the bloc. And the U.S. has also its own fiscal struggle this year, with it's almost hitting the debt ceiling and inability to pay debt. Do you think that the representatives of the U.S., in this case Vice President Kamala Harris, will have something to say about these things at the table of the summit?
Of course, they're not talking about deficit. They're not going to be talking about America's problem. They're right now are shaping what Biden wants, which is creating a new world order. And not many countries may be in line with that, but at least we still need a balance of terror, balance of power in this region, because otherwise we are overwhelmed by powerful countries. And you need some degree of peaceable solution. Otherwise, we ended up being hurt because everybody wants our critical minerals. Let's just be honest with this. This is about the search for scarce resources. And if the search of scarce resources are being hindered, they have means to disintegrate us. That is the key question. Do we want to disintegrate ourselves by having leaders who are not harmonizing quite well? I mean, if you're not powerful, you maybe want to be a little bit more diplomatic instead of challenging and ending up being subverted. We have separatism. We have scarce resources. We have people who are not loyal to the government. We've organized extra state powerful figures that disintegrate us, in a sense, in everyday life. I think we need to learn the good ways of dealing with humanity, dealing with poverty, dealing with justice. Nothing works. You sign on to IPF. That means non-corrupt practices, transparency, justice. Where is that all going to lie? I mean, you cannot just say hilirisasi without thinking of the consequence for the people at large. And don't go to BRICS. Don't go break relations just because you happen to disagree with what their policies are. I mean, come on, grow up. Think. If you're not powerful, just be nice. Be nice is always good. Be civil. Showing goodwill. We're not anymore a North Korean isolated nitwit, you know what I mean? Doing our own stupid stuff. Stupid. Everything is being canceled. I mean, LBP went to the US and then for the Inflation Reduction Act, and they said no. You cannot export cars to the US with Chinese batteries. I mean, we cannot export Nike to Europe because Europe doesn't like deforestation. Come on, be human, be mature. Stop this silliness, okay?
We hear you. We hear you, Prof. Suzie. Yes.
Yeah, I think we need to be nice.
Okay.
Just nice. I mean, it doesn't matter the president is nice, but it's not nice to other countries, You know what I mean? Personally, he's good, but he's not nice.
All right.
We'll take note on that.
Yes. We'll end our conversation on that note. Just be nice to each other. Prof. Suzie Sudarman, thank you so much for your honest and candid opinions on our program today. We truly appreciate your time. There was Prof. Suzie Sudarman, Chair of the Center for American Studies from the University of Indonesia. Thank you so much, Prof. Until next time, take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.